All right, hey there, and welcome to the Psycho Studios podcast, where today we are reviewing Heretic. And before we get on with the review, I would just like to say thank you for everyone recently watching our videos, and if you are enjoying, please subscribe and like, and share a like. So I do appreciate that. So back on to our review. I don't think it can really go much into depth, probably after we go over our scores, depending how this goes. But we had just watched the movie.
Like literally just watched.
So this is really fresh on our minds. So, oh man, where do I even begin? So the psycho scale, 1 to psycho, psycho being 10, all right?
Right, we don't see too many of those.
Right, so I'm going to give this...
I can't wait.
I'm going to give this a 2.
Oh.
So it's a 2 for me, and so let's hear what your score is at.
Yeah. So, and we've reminded our audience before, but we really don't talk about these films together. We want it to be fresh within this environment. And I was asking a couple of questions when we were post the movie today, so that was my bad, but I didn't get any answers. So this is still fresh, and we didn't share this. I'm giving it a 2 on the psycho scale as well.
Yeah, so that's pretty rough. I can say it myself, and so we don't like to bring politics or religion into things, but there's no way to get away from at least the religious standpoint, because this movie is just religious through and through, and what religion means to people, right? It's so. I guess hence the name of the movie as well, right?
Heretic, right? Yeah.
So the biggest thing for me is that I think it's great for a movie when it's going to question your beliefs, right? Or like that could
Challenge,
could be anything. It doesn't have to be the belief in God, right? Like what this movie is doing. It could be your belief in who you are as a person.
Right, your belief in being friendly to strangers. Whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
So, that seemed like it was going to be interesting. But this, unfortunately, doesn't hit on any mark, and the cinematography was only cool at certain points, but then it was being too cool for its own self, and it didn't know what to do with it.
It was almost seemed to me like after maybe the first 15 minutes, it started to fall flat. Like, oh, wait,
right.
At least the cinematography is going to save this.
So the problem with this movie, why I give it such a low score, for me personally, is because the movie starts okay. Dialogue is really poor. Okay, I'm disinterested in already checking out. But they're riding their bike and they're trying to talk to people. And it's
who's riding their bike?
2024. These two younger girls.
Yeah, known as sisters.
Right.
Yeah.
And they're going around and asking people, but they're not approaching any form like I would think you would want to.
Well, and it's interesting that you mention it because they are Mormon, right? And where we live in the part of the country, we definitely, I don't see it as much as I used to, but I used to run into those Mormons on the bikes, right? And I'm not making a pun, literally that's how they are. And you're right, like did they not research that?
I don't know. It's bizarre. But anyways, the reason why this movie doesn't work even to begin with, like, not at all. They seem very well educated and smart people, and they question things right off the bat. But the whole point is that they go up to this person's house that had asked to be talked to about their religion.
I want some more information about LDS.
But they can't come in unless there's a woman present, like a roommate or a wife, whatever, a girlfriend, doesn't matter. There just need to be some other woman present.
Which is a smart rule.
Right. So they were just going to be in the doorway, but it's raining down hard, of course. But they still knock it off. But he barely does anything to convince them to come in, and they do it, which doesn't make the movie's over if you don't do that.
Yeah, like you have to suspend such major disbelief, and like Michael is saying, they did give us in a very short window that these females, these Mormon young women, are smart, articulate, and Hugh Grant, he is. I mean, I was surprised by his acting because I haven't seen him in a vehicle like this. His name is Mr. Reed, which they emphasize, and not the stereotype, but he looks creepy at the doorway.
Yeah, that's true.
Right off the bat, he looks creepy, and you're right. what are we, 16, 17 minutes into the movie, and we're already like, what the hell? Why did they go in?
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense to me. And again, I have no problem with religion or anything like that, so don't think of that in this review. But I mean, he's still driving so many points down their throats, and they're scared. Who's going to retain any of that or really think that stuff through in the position that they're in? And seriously, when leaving the movie, I feel like I wasted every minute I watched that movie because it's not entertaining, and the set pieces are super great. It doesn't look like there's any CGI to speak of at all. Like, that's the only thing that you come out there, like, it looked cool where they were at that house. But other than that, I mean, what else can I say about the movie? It's dark, not in tone, but dark visually. And, man, I just...
It wants to be dark in tone, but it doesn't ring true.
Right, so it's not horrific on any level.
No, and it was an hour and 50 minutes, right? So we're talking almost a 2-hour film. Like Michael said, we're not here bashing religion. Whatever floats your boat. It's the way that it was presented in that context.
Right.
And what's surprising to me is this is an A24 film. And I normally don't see this type of...
But as you can tell, like all the movies, trailers we saw, I know they dictate to that publishing, but they're pumping out movies left and right now, so they're just a giant conglomerate now.
So now it's
they're not just
down. Yeah.
There's no way they're a small movie studio if you look at what they're producing.
So we're losing the coolness or the freshness of their early films.
I wouldn't, again, they're just the publisher, right? The producer. They're not. Yeah. They're not the ones behind making the movies, right?
Yeah. No, in this case, it was two... I don't know if they're brothers or not, but... No, they're not brothers. You've got Scott Beck and Bryan Woods, and those are the two guys that directed it as well as wrote it, and I saw their name under the producing credits as well.
Right. So, I mean, for me, I don't know what else I can really say about this movie. I mean, I would like people to still watch the movie and form their own opinion, but for me... This is a definite miss, and save your money. I mean, when it comes out in digital and you can get it for cheap or however you want to stream it,
super cheap,
see it. I mean, watch it then. But man, I'm glad that we saw it so other people don't have to. We just put it that way.
And it's great points. And we mentioned one thing as we were stepping into the sunlight after watching that film. It's interesting for me, just from the standpoint that we went to see a film on a Friday morning. Very rare for me. I know Michael sees movies at more varying times and days than I. But I mentioned to Michael, this is running right now at a 94% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah, and he didn't seem to find out how many people had actually reviewed it at the time. So that is a huge factor into the score. So if 3 people reviewed it and it's at that score, oh, well, that doesn't say much. So if there's 175... 15 people? I mean, as we have found out from the many movies we've watched and looked at those scores, there's no parallel. I mean, you can look at the audience scores. Those are usually close or what people really feel, I believe.
That was trending at about 74% this morning.
Right, so I would think, our score, we're really harsh. We're movie fanatics. So I can see that being an average score for a movie. Because again, I unfortunately, I didn't find any entertaining value of it, but other people might. But it's not suspenseful or creepy, and the movie plays itself out like there's nothing that you're questioning, is that going to happen or not? It just, everything unfolds exactly the way you think it will. So
yeah, and I will make sure moving forward, if I do reference Rotten Tomatoes, I'll see the number. It almost sounds like it's an Amazon review. It's only 3 people saying that kitchen mat is good. What good does it do? So, My bad on that. I will say, so within one of the critics' snippets this morning, and I wasn't reading about the plot. I was simply reading about what a critic might say, and that critic was saying they didn't understand why it was listed as horror.
Right.
They didn't see anything in it that was horrific.
That's correct.
And they listed it as a thriller and a suspense movie. I don't see it as any of those.
Right.
And I'm going to use a Catholic reference. I was born and raised a strict Catholic, and that is, if you've ever had the communion wafer or unleavened bread, that's what this movie is. It doesn't have any taste, it lays flat, and it doesn't give you any sustenance if you're hungering for a good film. And we get that you can't be right or wrong about a movie, right? It's what moves you. I'm flabbergasted by the film. I really am.
And so, to drive it home, because I serious, I don't think there's anything else you can really say about this movie, is that you saw the trailer, you saw everything you needed to know. No joke. The trailer didn't leave anything up to the imagination. They spoiled something really big in the trailer. It doesn't make any sense. Again, that's what I'm saying. You see the trailer, you can take from what you will from the movie.
Well,
that's it.
We at least call that out then? What did you see in the trailer that...
Well, the biggest thing is like the imagination should have been, is this guy really bad or good? And immediately in the trailer, she finds out that candle isn't real, and they allude to there's a pie being baked, right? And she finds out it's not real immediately, but that's in the trailer. So, I mean, the biggest question is if this guy, the psychological part of the movie that should have been the big what if, right? The big what if in movies are so great sometimes. But again, the trailer spoiled it immediately. So that's why it's so frustrating with movies, and they wonder why the box office numbers are low. I mean, think of what we just went through.
Yeah, no, that's a great call out, because I'm pretty sure at least a couple of times we saw that trailer together before a few movies we watched recently.
Saw too many times. Too many times.
And Michael's right. Like, that's the spoiler alert, right? He's Hugh Grant's character, Mr. Reed. He gets the girls to come inside because he says his wife is baking a pie. And so they come in, and he brings out these completely flat soft drinks and this candle. And we've seen all that in the trailer, so you know what's going to happen. And of course he doesn't have a wife. And the movie just, I don't even know what, like, I can't believe that was even made. And I know that seems harsh. It's such a small film, which we're okay with. We don't need, Michael was referencing the era of the big budget movies and how that started with Iron Man and where those universes took the box office, because as Michael was saying, the box office is down 17% this year from last year and almost 30% from 2019. And it's no wonder. And what came out last month for Halloween? They said Halloween has just been abysmal for box office. What's the one movie that came out, son?
Smile and Terrifier.
Okay, yeah, we got Smile 2, which we haven't seen yet, and Terrifier 3. And Terrifier 3, if I heard you correctly, it's north of 80 million, though?
Well, it's climbing up there.
Okay, it's climbing up there on a $2 million budget.
Yeah.
And we weren't, at least I wasn't able to gather the budget for this movie. I like to get that, but it seems like that's becoming harder to find.
Harder to find, but it's also with how new the movie is.
Okay, that makes sense.
Especially if they're not going to be advertising it like Terrifier, that it was a $2 million budget, and they're
right,
like,
they're not
proud of
promoting
that.
the low budget. Yeah, no, that makes sense.
But A24, right?
Yeah, A24
is the company that usually doesn't have expensive movies.
So you're right. That's like their wheelhouse.
That's the thing.
Yeah, we keep it in a.
I forget what movie they're making with The Rock and a few other big names that are in it. I think it's like a boxing movie kind of, but it's one of the biggest budgets they've ever produced.
Got it. So they normally keep themselves to lower budgets.
That's from my understanding, at least.
No, that makes sense, especially when I reflect on the movies that they've brought out. But to kind of just wheel in that movie piece, it's a super small movie. I think the cast is comprised of, you've got the two young ladies playing the sisters. You've got Mr. Reed, which is Hugh Grant. And then you have, he shows up as like one of the elders, they call them in the church. And that doesn't necessarily mean you're old. It just means that you have a lot of experience within the LDS church. And he's from That 70s Show. And I thought that was interesting. And I meant to get his name, and I think I did. Yes, it's not Gopher, it's Topher Grace. And that's really it. I mean, it is that small of a movie.
Yep.
And I wish there was. I think I guess that would never work, but I wish there was some way you could get a refund when a movie is that horrible.
Yeah.
And it never goes anywhere. It lays flat. We talked about the small film itself. We've got a tagline which I shared with Michael earlier. The tagline is "Question everything."
Right.
And you didn't have much to say about that. And then we talked about you mentioned it, so Michael called it out even though I didn't share it with him. They're claiming that no AI was used in making the film, and the highlights I had, I thought the credits were interesting.
Yep.
And when you say that that's a highlight, you know that you're in trouble. And then I liked at the beginning there was very distinct sounds being used within the film. Even at that one point, you've got the bicycle and the clicking as it's rolling across the street. Those are the things that stood out to me, and I think I had one more, which was the music. There's a couple of songs that Mr. Reed is playing to the girls to hammer home his point about iteration, and they were a couple of older songs that I liked, including that one from the Hollies. But man, I really, it's my fault too, because I'm the one who suggested this, so I'm definitely going to have to weigh in on Michael and let him suggest the next movie, so I'm going to give him an apology, so I'm sorry, man.
Everything's good, and I'm glad we at least watched it, and now we can put this out for people to hopefully make a decision on their own by watching our review, so to speak, of the movie.
Yeah, and it gives us an opportunity to do it a little bit different. We keep wanting it to be fresh, so hot off the presses. We see the movie, we shoot. This is as fresh as it's been, and hopefully next time the movie will be as fresh as we are.
Right, exactly. But, I mean, that wraps it up on my end, so.
It wraps it up on my end as well, and we do want to make sure that we let all our psychos know that we want you to be safe out there, stay positive, and hopefully a good film is in your future.
Yes, and don't forget, please stay psycho.
Yes, absolutely.